And good morning, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Real Talks. My name is David Steele. I hope everybody had a fantastic weekend um, and did a lot of cool things. I mean, we had a big movie to come out, and I put the spoiler cast out the other day. Um, so you guys can go watch that. Of course, I'm talking about Indiana Jones, the Dial of Destiny. I went to go see it the other day. There's some news about that we'll get to in a couple minutes. So yeah, quick programming note. Tomorrow is the 4th of July, so I am going to take the day off, and we will be right back here on Wednesday. So no show tomorrow, guys, but we'll definitely be back on Wednesday. So let's just jump right into it. So as I made mention, there was this little movie that came out that was much anticipated throughout the year and the summer once it got introduced, and I'm talking about Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. And this movie basically was one of the most not only anticipated movies of 2023, but what had one of the highest budgets of 2023. And that being said, there was a lot of things surrounding what would be going on with this movie. Okay, how well would Indiana Jones be? Because there was a number of questions surrounding it. First and foremost, Steven Spielberg was not coming back to direct this. So that immediately, he said, after Crystal Skull, he basically said, I'm kind of done. So, we had a brand new director come in, and that, of course, was James Mangold. And he's done films like Ford v Ferrari, Logan, and many others. So you knew that was going to be good. Second and foremost, Harrison Ford is 80 years old, or I think it's 81, 82 years old. So, he's not going to be exerting himself as much as in doing these major action sequences as much as, you know, somebody else. Okay. I mean, you take a look at somebody like Sylvester Stallone, who's in fantastic. I'm not saying Harrison's not, but take a look at like somebody Stallone. He's in fantastic shape for his age. Okay. And he's still, and mind you, he's got a number of different people around him. Helmuth, or not Helmuth, but Jason Statham and, Dolph Lundgren and all these other guys. So that's another thing. Number three, what new iconic thing would they have to come up with to really push this thing along? So in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, we had something different, but this was different. I mean, if you looked at the first three films, okay, I mean, with the exception of maybe the Shakara stones, and I don't even know if those were actually. I would assume they're real to a certain extent. Um, you had three iconic things that are basically like archaeological treasures. Okay, in the Raiders of the Lost Ark, you had the Ark of the Covenant. Okay, where the Ten Commandments were kept. In Temple of Doom, you had the Shakara stones. Okay, and then of course in Last Crusade, you had the Holy Grail. So, what new thing would be, coming up? And of course, one of the big things, one of the big fads in Hollywood right now, besides the multiverse, is time travel. And so they decided they set on that. So then it was, how do we put enough nostalgia, because that's one of the big things right now, that we put enough nostalgia in there, but we have an original type of story. So as I said, I went to go see it the other day. It had a $297 million budget, and this is one of those films too that, let's face it, with all of the technological things that we have Hollywood has at its disposal. um, it's interesting to see what happens. So one of the big things that is coming along today is de-aging, and how it's done, and you know the amount of money it takes and everything else. Okay, all of that being said, it had a 295 or 297 million budget. So the question is, and what everybody wants to know is, how much did it make, right? So this comes from THR, and I'm going to put this in. I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to put it in perspective for you guys. So Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny cursed with a $60 million domestic opening. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny dug up an estimated $60 million in its debut domestic weekend. A troubled start for the fifth and final installment of the famed action-adventure series starring Harrison Ford. The hope now is that Disney and Lucasfilm tentpole will hold well, beginning this week as Americans celebrate the 4th of July. The movie, directed by James Mangold, should finish Tuesday with a domestic total of $82 million. So they're already projecting another 22 for today and tomorrow and so on. Overseas, the movie launched with $70 million with a lackluster global start of $130 million. The UK led with 8.9. France led with 4.7. South Korea, 4 million. Germany, just around 4 million. But the picture bombed in China, only making $2.3 million. For Dial of Destiny, the challenge has always been attracting new, younger fans, in addition to those who grew up with the franchise, like myself. The movie, which suffered a series of delays, cost a hefty $295 million to make before marketing. So even if you take $100 million for marketing, this is almost a $400 million picture. As it stood, the movie's opening weekend skewed notably toward the older crowd, with 42% of ticket goers being 45 and up, yours truly, including 23% 55 and older. That's a breakdown rarely seen when it comes to a Hollywood summer tentpole. Even before the pandemic, older moviegoers weren't known for rushing out to a movie to see it on opening weekend. The picture also skewed notably toward male, 58%. On Saturday, families started turning up. The filmmakers had hoped for a domestic launch close to the $65 million, but a B-plus cinema score and tepid reviews are likely hampering word of mouth. One bright spot is that the 88% positive audience on Rotten Tomatoes. Dial of Destiny is a sequel to, of course, the 2008 Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which posted an impressive 3-day opening of $100 million. Now, you have to remember that was pre-pandemic, too. Crystal Skull is likely the first of the 3 indie films was directed by Steven Spielberg. The Indiana Jones movie, of course, sees Harrison Ford reprise his role as a swashbuckling archaeologist. The 80-year-old stars opposite Phoebe Waller-Bridges, who was really good, by the way, Antonio Banderas, John Ryle-Davies, Toby Jones, Boyd Halbrook, and, of course, Mads Mikkelsen as the villain. Keeping the film series ongoing, the Nazi theme alive, the Dial of Destiny storyline revolves around an ancient device chased by Jones and a villain played by Mikkelsen. Although opening pre-4th of July is DreamWorks Animation and Universal's Ruby Gillman Teenage Kraken, it bombed with an estimated $5.2 million. The family picture came in 6th overseas, and that opened to 7.6 globally. However, holdouts like Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse swung past the $600 million worldwide mark. The animated picture placed number 2 domestically with $11.5 million for a grand total domestically of $330, just a shade under $340 million. Overseas, it hit $267 million for a global total of $607 million. Disney and Pixar's Elemental, which we have a story coming up on them a little bit later on, continue to show legs after a troubled start, placing number 3 domestically with 11.3 for a North American total of $88.8 million. Overseas, where it continues to roll out, earned another 29.8 for a grand total of 186.8. And No Hard Feelings, starring Jennifer Lawrence, tumbled to 50%, which, by the way, is your average run-of-the-mill fall. I mean, that you want anywhere between 40 to 50%, and that's holding good. To a second weekend of $7.5 million for a domestic total of $29.3, worldwide $49.3 million. And of course, Paramount's Transformers: Rise of the Beast rounds off the top 5 with $7 million domestic, and it has made just over $381 million worldwide. Okay, couple of things to talk about. Number 1, this movie was okay. This movie was not fantastic. That, and anybody who watched the spoiler cast knew what I meant and had seen it. Okay. That being said, okay, Lucasfilms took a shot with this and it missed. Okay, it missed big time. And we are starting to see, at least in this summer, and probably moving forward, we are starting to see quality over quantity. And any films that are not doing well, especially opening weekend, okay, are not going to do well moving forward. That's just a fact of life. Okay. What it's not saying in there, too, in that article, is the Flash tumbled another 66%. Okay. So this is just falling off a cliff and free falling at this point. That being said, films that are doing well, okay, have a good story, have a good plot, maybe have a good villain. Okay. And I think that this didn't have any. Okay. This was trying to combine a couple of different things that were the fads today. Okay. If you want to call it the Dial of Destiny multiverse type of thing, you could do that. And that's really what it was to a certain extent. So it tried to rely on that. It tried to rely on nostalgia. It tried to rely on story, and it just didn't work. Personally, I thought Phoebe Waller-Bridges was very good for what she had. Okay, I mean, she kind of, I won't say carried the film, but she was a good supporting role for Harrison Ford's Indy. The kid, the other character that she was with, there was a complete throwaway character for me. Matt Mikkelsen was very good. He was good as the villain. It's a shame that they're not kind of come back and reprise this and everything else. What this film tried to do also is rely on nostalgia with cameos and an ending, which I'm not going to give away, guys, in case you want to go see it. But you'll understand it when you see it. There's a film that I compared to in the spoiler cast, which I won't say here, that you'll say, "Oh, I see what they did." B plus cinema score is not going to help it. I mean, look at The Flash. That had a B plus cinema score and bombed. Okay. Now, to put this in perspective, okay, The Flash made $55 million opening weekend. Right? It made 55. So this made that much more than The Flash opening weekend. Okay. That much more. And I think that part of it was, the story. I think part of it was him. I mean, he's 80 years old. I mean, how much is he really going to be able to do? Okay. A lot of this picture was CGI. A lot. And that's just a part of the nature of it. So I think Dial of Destiny was a good, entertaining film. It's definitely not perfect, and it's definitely not the upper level we would expect, but still a very good film, in my opinion. These films deserve better. Yeah, no, I think, and I would agree with you on, and look, I only saw this yesterday, so I can't really, coming out and doing the spoiler cast the day I saw it, and it was the same thing about The Flash, okay? I think I was very harsh on the film. When I look back on it, it's not a bad film. There were elements to this film that are good, okay? But there are some elements that I can't get on board with. And as far as, the film itself, yeah, it's not a bad film. The problem is, okay, especially this summer in the last 2.5 months, everything's so packed together. Okay. I mean, this goes all the way back to May 5th. Okay. With Guardians of the Galaxy. Okay. And then you had, that had the 5th and the 12th. And then you had, another film come out. Okay. And then, I mean, Little Mermaid was at the end of the month. And then you had Spider-Verse that came in, and that really did well. And then you had Transformers, and you had The Flash, and now you have this. So there's so much packed into it. And I've said it before, if one film doesn't do well, the other one's just going to eat it up. I mean, Transformers and everything else. So, I mean, I probably will go back and watch this eventually and probably go, you know what? It's not as bad as it seems. But right now, And the numbers pan this out, right? The numbers pan this out. I mean, so, and I'm, so that being said, it's one of those things where this will be lucky, I think, to break even. At least, 3, 4, $500 million. Dial of Destiny needs to be stored up. Well, I mean, no, of course, the reference he's referring to is Raiders of the Lost Ark when they put the Ark in the warehouse. But I mean, it's one of those things where I think that this is why I watch films 2 and 3, 4 times, because you have a film like this that the very first thing you see is it's a visceral reaction, right? It's like, oh my God, this was so bad, or this was so good, and then you have to take a step back and go, okay, how is this film actually compared to, and this is where you can go back and re-examine the film and everything else. But I think the fact is this: on the surface, right now today, being 3 or 4 days out, it didn't really hit home. When you have that piece didn't even talk about the younger crowd. Okay. And I understand what they were trying to do. I get what they were trying to do. Okay. What they were trying to do is attract the older crowd, which they did, apparently, but they didn't get the younger crowd. Because the last film that had come out was Kingdom Crystal Skull. And that apparently didn't really do well. So, I mean, when you have a 20-something-year-old guy wanting to go see this movie, he was raised on Crystal Skull. Now, he may have gone back and watched Raiders of the Lost Ark and, Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom and Last Crusade, but his generation was raised with Crystal Skull. And if he only saw Crystal Skull, that completely turned him off. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I mean, it's probably going to win one more week. Okay. Because, I did find it curious. Okay. You had Elemental. Look, Spider-Verse right now is more power to Spider-Verse, because that making $11.5 million, I think. $11.5 million, and it's almost made $340 million domestically. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. And I think that, I mean, this is absolutely a lock for best animated picture. We'll see. It's going to be interesting to see if the Academy decides to give it a Best Picture nomination, but I don't know if they'll do that. But so it's one of those things where this movie's in trouble, and it bombed in China. And the thing about China is that is the number one largest market in the world, more than the United States, more than Canada, more than India, more than anybody else. China is the number one market in the world. And when you have a bomb in China, you're in trouble. So, look, this summer has been very, very tough when it comes to movies. Because if you're not at the top of your game, you're just going to get pushed aside. And we've seen this so many times. Whether it's The Flash, whether it's, Elemental, finished third this week. That tells you something, okay? I mean, even going back earlier in the year with Shazam and Creed 3 and, all these other films. So, I don't know. I mean, right now, Guardians is blowing everybody away because, number one, it was Guardians of the Galaxy. Number 2 was the third one. And number 3, it was the start of the summer. That kicked off the whole summer. So, hopefully, if this has a 50% drop, so let's look to next week. Okay, tomorrow is July 4th here in the United States. If it actually moves forward and it gets a 50% drop, you're looking at about a $30 million take home next weekend. And That's not too bad. That's not too bad. It will be interesting to see what the drop off is. If it drops off like The Flash, forget about it. If it drops off like Ant-Man and the Wasp that drops 66%, forget about it. But if we can have it drop like No Hard Feelings, then that will be curious. But to have it be a very tepid response. And one thing that I think really hurt this film to begin with was this plate of cans. So when you had all of these other films, I think the fact that Elemental and Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny actually played cans for the critics there really hurt the film. Because that was the first time it had been ever screened. And when they came out and said, not so much, it really hurt it. Because here in the States, everybody was looking forward to it and was like, can't wait to see it. And then, oh, man. And then it started, the critics saying, okay, it was a good movie. It's a good movie. And then you see this opening weekend, and you're like, really? This is how much money it made? So, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens. It's sad seeing these actors returning to their iconic roles and people not showing up. It's kind of the tragic to see how this goes by. I understand, and I agree with you, Antonius. I mean, here's the thing. You have to look at the in-between time, right? So there's a difference between something like Star Wars, for example, okay, where, in 05 to 15, okay, even though you had Rogue One and everything else, but the characters themselves, because you could just interchange characters all day long, bring brand new characters in and everything else. Because essentially, anybody who's seen The Force Awakens knows, when I went to go see The Force Awakens and I was in the theater watching, the first 15 to 20 minutes of this movie, I said, this is Star Wars all over again. But also, if it's so not broke, don't fix it. Okay, here's my point. You could just put those in there. When you have a iconic character like Indiana Jones, it's one of those things where he's the only person that can play the role, right? Everybody, I mean, try to think somebody, it's like playing Han Solo. You couldn't think of anybody else playing Han Solo. It's the same thing with Indiana Jones. And the problem is that when you have a duration, people only remember the last thing they see with the character. So if Crystal Skull didn't do well, they're going to, I don't want to say not show up, but it's going to be difficult for them to show up. That being said, I mean, this is why you're bringing in a younger Phoebe Waller-Bridges, right? I agree with you. I mean, look, I would have liked to have the film ended differently. I think that they could have gone with a different ending. It would have been much better, but that's just my own opinion. So, anyways, guys, what do you think about Indiana Jones only opening up to $60 million here in the States? Do you think that's a good thing? Do you think that that's the way it should be? Or do you think they lowballed it? Do you think this movie should have been $100 million? Do you think that, the reviews are wrong? And this is a really, really good movie. Leave me your thoughts down in the comments and I'll get back to everybody. Quickly before we move on. Crystal Skull was sure divisive for a huge box office. More than 7. Yeah. I mean, it's, and that's the thing. You can have a movie be very, the critics do not like it, but the audience will. And that's a big thing too. And it really depends on what the age of the critics are. If they're older critics and they have a remembrance of going, let's say they've been doing it 30 years, okay, or 40 years, and they remember Raiders of the Lost Ark, and they remember Last Crusade, okay, there's something to be said too about somebody that comes in with Last Crusade being their last movie, and then someone that's coming in right now with, Crystal Skull or even Dial of Destiny doing it. So there's something to be said there. I agree there. So so we are in July, okay? in one of the most anticipated movies of not only the summer, not only the year, but the next month, okay, is Barbie. Barbie has taken everything by storm. This has gone viral. Um, I remember seeing this the first time, and I heard about this. I went, "Oh my God, they're making a Barbie movie," and then nothing was really, set in stone. And then we started to get a couple of, casting and everything else, and the director Greta Gerwig, who's done Little Women and a couple others, and I went, "Okay, that's good." And they cast Margot Robbie, and of course she's been blowing up for the past 5, 6, 7 years. I mean, she's of course Wolf of Wall Street. She did a little cameo in The Big Short. She did I, Tonya. I mean, she's been fabulous. And at that point, I went, okay. So then they go get Ryan Gosling, and of course, I mean, we're talking La La Land and several other movies. He's Blade Runner 2049, and I went, okay, what exactly is this story going to be? Because it's about a doll, right? So the first trailer comes out. And of course, everybody knows about the first trailer. It was set to the music of 2001: A Space Odyssey, and it was pretty good. I got to be honest, it was pretty good. Then we get a second trailer. I'm like, eh. And it really, I had a completely preconceived notion of what this was going to be. So we get the final trailer, and I'm like, wow, okay, I'm in. And I'm in. I'm in on this. And I think that it's really interesting to see where this is going to go. That all being said, Barbie, okay, is going to be the most anticipated movie of July, okay, for the month. So this comes to us from The Wrap, and this is actually going to edge out Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning and Oppenheimer, believe it or not. And I think there's something to be said there. You might as well paint Hollywood pink for the month, because Barbie, the upcoming fantasy comedy starring Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling, is the most anticipated movie of July, according to Whip Media's latest anticipation report based on viewer data from Television Time, its TV and movie tracking app, and 26 million global registered users. That's a good sign, obviously, when you consider Barbie is facing off against stiff competition at the box office this month. Much has been made about the Greta Gerwig directed flick releasing on the same day as Oppenheimer. Christopher Nolan's new movie on the development of the atomic bomb. Both movies will release in theaters on July 21st in the United States. Fans are clearly looking forward to seeing Nolan's new biographical movie, which stars Cillian Murphy as J. Robert Oppenheimer, the American physicist who spearheaded the Manhattan Project. The fans are simply more interested in seeing Tom Cruise return for his seventh Mission Impossible role, as it turns out. Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1 came in as the second most anticipated movie in July, while Oppenheimer placed in third. And I'll show you that chart in just a moment. Back to Barbie for a moment. If you're interested in how potential audiences break down, 60% of the followers heading into its release are women. That's not a shock. According to Whip Media, the viewership and its audience leans young, with 25% of its followers being 24 or younger. That's very good because they spend a lot of money. The 25 to 29 age cohort is the second biggest slice, with about 18% of its pre-release followers falling into that bucket. Moving on, Haunted Mansion, the star-studded horror comedy that's coming to set out on June 28th, July 28th. So this is the chart. We'll get to that in just a moment. And it stars Lakeith Starford as a paranormal tour guide. And that's got Tiffany Haddish, Owen Wilson, Danny DeVito, Rosario Dawson, and Jamie Lee Curtis. The horror theme comes with Insidious: The Red Door, the fifth most anticipated movie of July. And this is the fifth film starring Patrick Wilson. He'll be making his debut behind the camera. It's worth noting that Bird Box Barcelona, the Spanish spinoff to the 2018 Bird Box, came in as the 10th most anticipated movie of the month. That's pretty impressive considering the new movie that doesn't have Sandra Bullock. And that will hit on the 14th. Okay, so here's the chart. Okay, here's the chart. And I see your comments, Antonio, and I will get to those in just a few minutes. But yeah, so here's the chart. So this is interesting. Okay, so this is the question was asked: what upcoming films are you, United States audiences, most interested in watching? These are the top anticipated movies, either theatrically or streaming, for the month of July. Barbie is number 1. Okay. Mission Impossible is number 2. Oppenheimer is number 3. So let's run through each one of these movies real quick. Barbie is one of those films that I think that there's a lot of anticipation for because we don't know what it's about at the end of the day. I mean, we now have an idea of what it's about, but we didn't for many, 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 many months. And I think that that mystery of it really did well, right? I think that being said, you have somebody like a Margot Robbie who's stepping in the shoes, and there's a big thing about it. So, I mean, yes, you've got Will Ferrell in it, you've got America Ferrera, you've got a couple others. But yeah, I think in Barbie, as it said, okay, 66% of them are fans of this film are women. Okay. And you have the 25 to 29 crowd, and they're spending a lot of money. So I think that's going to really bode well for this. And there was an article about a month ago that said Barbie was tracking more than Oppenheimer was. Because you got to look at the nature of the content, right? Barbie's this fun-loving, doll party, summer type of film. And on the other hand, you have Oppenheimer, which is very dark, which is very depressing, which is very, historic. And you don't know how it's going to go. And it's a 3-hour runtime. And that really doesn't help matters most. Nonetheless, I think that that's phenomenal. I think that, the fact that this is number 1, their marketing was absolutely great. And I think, I'm in. I had a totally preconceived notion of what this was, and they hooked me with the last trailer. Okay, I was laughing, and I absolutely want to see it. So I'm going to obviously do the double feature like millions of other people probably, but I'm really curious to see what's going to happen with that. Mission Impossible. You know exactly what you're getting with Mission Impossible. You know exactly what you're getting with Mission Impossible. Okay. Everybody that has seen the press and the people that have seen this said this movie's out of touch, out of sight good. Right now it's tracking for $90 million opening weekend. I think it probably could hit 100, but moreover than that, if this is as good as people think it is, I had a hot take. I think this could be a Best Picture nominee. And I know that you're like, what the hell? Yeah, I do. Because you have to look at a couple of things, okay? Number 1, Tom Cruise has a lot of goodwill in general, okay? So, Top Gun Maverick made $1.5 billion last year, okay? Number 2, it is the last part 1 of the last films that he is doing for this franchise. All you're going to do is take a look at Dune Part 2 or Dune Part 1 last year. That got nominated for Best Picture. Okay? If it's artistically done, they will nominate it. Okay? Number 3, it's the first time in 5 years we've had a Mission Impossible film. And they have some dangerous, dangerous things in it. I'm not saying it's the end-all, be-all, but there's something to be said about, I've always said Tom Cruise is the last movie star we have. And all you got to do is watch the 9-minute thing on YouTube from Paramount, and that will get you hooked. The prep, the development, everything going into this, and then going and seeing this and actually getting it done, amazing. So I think there's something to be said there too. And number three, okay, we'll go back to it real quick with Oppenheimer. I mean, this is one of those projects that it's a dark movie, okay, because we know what came out of it. But it's a biopic, and I think it's a story that has to be told. Okay? I mean, this whole thing changed the history of the world. And that's the main focus of this. This person here, J. Robert Oppenheimer, changed the world with what he developed. And so it's really, the counter program is fascinating. Like I said, you've got the dark one, and you've got it's very interesting to see what happens. So, I mean, and then you have others like Haunted Mansion, okay, Insidious. I like horror films. I'm not a Insidious type of person. Joyride, I heard, was supposed to be good. So yeah, I mean, Bird Box, of course, the 2018 film starred Sandra Bullock. So I mean, there's a lot of good movies coming out, and it's going to be interesting to see which ones hold fast. Okay, because whichever film comes out word of mouth on the 21st is going to have the whole 2 or 3 weeks of August until Blue Beetle. Okay, don't get me wrong. I think Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is going to do well, but it's not going to make as much buzz. So, anyways, guys, what films are you looking forward to? Which films are you going to go see opening day, or are you going to kind of wait to see how the ratings are? Is it Barbie? Is it Oppenheimer? Is it Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1? Leave me your thoughts down in the comments, and I'll get back to everybody. Okay, so I know, Antonius, you've got a lot of stuff here, so let's get to it. Plus, what you said about China is true. I remember Escape Plan and Terminator Genisys not performing well in the United States, but being hugely successful films in China. Yeah. China is one of those, a lot of major studios, okay, the core five, if you will, Universal, MGM, they rely on China for international. I mean, don't get me wrong. You've got India, you've got UK, but China they have over 1 billion people. So there's something to be said there about how that is, okay? And I think that's interesting. A lot of divisive sequels are indeed box office winners. Look at Jurassic World Dominion, Rise of Skywalker, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, Terminator 3, Batman Forever, etc. Okay, good point. And so what I'll say is this. Every single one of those films you named, with the exception of Batman Forever, was the final film. It was the final film in the trilogy. Okay? Now, when you have a franchise, okay, and we're going to take Jurassic World as a perfect example. That first Jurassic World blew up because there hadn't been one since Jurassic Park 3, I think, and it didn't do well. So when you're rebooting a franchise, the first film in every franchise is going to do very, very well. Whether it's A Force Awakens, whether it's, Jurassic World, whether it's whatever it is, okay? The culmination, if you will. That being said, the second one is going to decline a little bit because they know the story. It may not be as good, whatever. But that third one's going to blow up. That all being said, okay, what I'll say is this. So when you have a film, this is why when you have film franchises, you have to start out relatively okay. You have to build it up a little bit more, and then you have to hit your crescendo. A lot of times what ends up happening is the sequel is the best film of the three. So the second film in the trilogy is the best film of it, okay? Whether you're talking about, The Dark Knight or whatever it is. So, that being said, Dominion, and by the way, I haven't seen Dominion, but that made over $1 billion. Okay, I did see Jurassic. I did see Fallen Kingdom. Okay, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, Rise of Skywalker. I would say this, personally speaking, and I could be wrong about this. I think The Last Jedi could be a more divisive movie than Rise of Skywalker. Because with Rise of Skywalker, they had to retcon a lot of the stuff that was done in Last Jedi. A lot of it. That being said, that's why I think a lot of fans didn't really care for it. That's just me. And I didn't personally care for that, and I saw that twice. Once opening night, and I watched it a couple months later. Okay. Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, once again, this is the first film you have since 1989. Okay? So you're talking about a 15-year gap. Okay? Had this come out right around mid-90s, late 90s, I would have said, okay, they would have kind of done it wet. But that being said, you had a long gap there too. And this is not, remember, this isn't something like a Star Wars where you can just, throw characters in and out of it. Terminator 3 was going to be very divisive, always. Because no matter what you did, you were never, ever, ever going to be able to top Judgment Day. Never. It was impossible. Because it had everything. Okay? It had the emotion. It had the action. It had Arnold Schwarzenegger. It had all of the characters you loved. Plus, it had... So, I think that being said, so there's a lot of things there. And to your point, when you take a look at Dominion, okay, the thing is this. Dominion made yes, it made over $1 billion, but look at how much it made opening weekend. Remember, Antonius, and I've said this before, and you know this, it's not about the first weekend. It's about the second weekend. How much of a drop are you going to take between the weekend number 1 and weekend number 2? Margot Robbie is a great actress, and it'll be a huge win for her if the film performs well. Its premise reminds me of Enchanted and even The Last Action Hero, which the character appears in the real world. So yeah, I had never seen I've not seen Last Action Hero. Somebody was telling me the premise, and if you can actually think it's on Twitter, but you can actually go on Twitter, and there was a tweet that somebody put out and said, "I wish teaser trailers were done like this," and it's fabulous. It's absolutely fabulous. No, and she is a good actress. She really is a good actress. I gotta say, I'm intrigued about seeing Haunted Mansion on the big screen. It's Disney with horror comedy side. It has a great cast. Love Danny DeVito and Jamie Lee Curtis, and looks like a lot of fun. Yeah, and that tells you that, when you have, they've gotten to a part of their career where they can do anything they want, right? She's always going to be known for Halloween, and he's always going to be known for things like Twins, Throw Mama Off the Train. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, but he can do whatever he wants now. And I think that's the cool thing. So they're taking risks. Of course, she just won the Academy Award, so that, and it is Disney, so that there is something to be said there too. The runtime for Mission Impossible 7 is a bit of an issue for me, although I understand its purpose completely. At the end of the day, it has to do with the film's flow, and I love the direction if it works. So anybody who's not familiar with it, this is the longest running Mission Impossible film ever. So it's 2 hours and 45 or 49 minutes. So Christopher McQuarrie actually came out and said that the reason why he wanted to come back is because it was a massive story. And they couldn't fit it all in one story. Everybody that that has seen them film that I've spoken to said this is non-stop action. Like it almost gets to the point, Antonius, of like they need to just hit the brakes pump the brakes for a minute. But it's so good that you're on the edge of your seat, not only with what's going on with the dialogue and with everything else, that it's it's an incredible. So I think, to your point about having it be 2 hours and 45 minutes, The thing is that it's going to go by like that. I don't think that you're going to be sitting there like, okay, can we? Oh my God, we're only an hour in. Let's go. I think it's going to be really fast paced. So I understand where you're coming from, but look at it like this too. Look at all the John Wick films. The first John Wick was an hour and 50 minutes. John Wick 4 was almost 2.5 hours. So it's gotten bigger and bigger and longer, and the action has gotten bigger and longer. So it will be interesting. It will be interesting in that respect. That is very true. The final film of the franchise, one of the few exceptions where a franchise did probably great was Creed. Yes, I agree. So anybody, you can go back right now on the channel and watch. When all the way back in March, okay, I did a whole Creed rewatch. I did Creed 2, and then a spoiler cast for Creed 3. Creed was amazing. I still think to this day Sylvester Stallone got robbed of an Academy Award, and I just, it irks me to this day. Mark Rylance, I saw Bridge of Spies twice. I didn't care for it. Okay, moving on. But he was incredible. And the thing is, Stallone won the Globe and the Critics' Choice Award too. Okay, so I digress there. Creed 2 is okay. Creed 2 is good. Was it great? No. Okay. And always it's hard to top what you first put out. Okay. Creed 3 was very, very good. It was very, very good. Box office showed it, and people forget about this. That was his directorial debut. Were there problems with the film? Sure. But those could be worked out. From that one thing, you got a whole Creedverse that Amazon's developing. And I think that's important too. So, no, I agree. I think Creed 3 was amazing. Absolutely. Last Jedi is a divisive film, but it's still a good movie in my opinion. And probably, in my opinion, again, has Mark Hamill's best performance as Luke Skywalker. He's much more experienced. Yeah, I can see that. He's an older, wiser Jedi, right? I mean, we don't, and that's the beauty about it. Okay? That's the beauty about it. Because the OTS, the original series, was all based on him. Okay? Star Wars, Empire, Jedi, okay? So he's learned everything. And as I went, I can't believe Jedi turned 40 this year. And by the way, guys, I did a whole Return of the Jedi's 40th anniversary video on this. So go back and watch that. But that being said, Jedi was about two things: acceptance and redemption. Okay? So that's what he did in Jedi. I mean, he lost Yoda, he lost his father. Okay. So when we see him in The Last Jedi, he's accepting all these things. He's already accepted all these things. And you're right, he is much more experienced. And really, that was his film. That was his film. And yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly. He turned, oh my goodness. Terminator 2 turned 32 years old today, by the way. Unbelievable. Okay, I'm officially old. Oh my God. But see, okay, you bring up a good point. It's a matter of how we view films at the time, and then how we view films later on in time. Okay. And that being said, there are films, there's no way that could get made today. There's no way. The technology back then, 32 years ago, was cutting edge. Was absolutely cutting edge stuff. And there's something to be said about that film. Not only because it's James Cameron, not only because it's a great sequel, but how it's done. And I think that it's one of those things where I mean, this is why I put Cameron, at least for me, on the top of the on the top on my my Mount Rushmore. Because the thing is that that film had everything you wanted, right? It had emotion. It had um, it had action. I mean, it had Arnold. So yeah, yeah. So I mean, that's unbelievable. That turned 32. That's unbelievable. Matt Jarbo showcased the trailer. Yes, and by the way, it was on Matt Jarbo. So I was actually on. So anybody who's, I was actually on Matt Jarbo's stream about a week ago. That's why I was so messed up my sleep schedule. So we did it. I'll finish your comment in just a minute. I was actually, so he fell asleep, came back on and did a stream around 10:30 at night, and I was on his stream. We didn't finish until 4 in the morning. That's why my sleep schedule was all messed. So let me finish the thing. Matt Jarbo showcased the trailer for Last Action Hero recently on his channel through one of his streams. Great trailer. Also, yeah. Also filled a lot of the spoilers for his time. Yeah, and that's the thing too. We look at spoilers completely different, Antonius. Completely different. Like today, it's really like, oh my god, I can't watch this. That's why it's spoilings war, But no, it was on Matt Jarbo. Matt Jarbo actually, he's such a great guy. I'm trying to. I'll message him. I absolutely want to get him on, or hopefully I can go on his stream again because I had an absolute blast doing that. Stallone was indeed robbed of an Oscar, and personally, I found Bridge of Spies dull. As for Creed 2, I thought it was brilliant, especially Rocky's end. It was unbelievable emotion and full. Yeah. I mean, it's been a minute since I have to go back and watch it again. But yeah, no, I would agree with you. It was. I think the thing is too that the fact is that the whole Drago thing. I mean that's really. I mean that I will say one thing. That scene in the restaurant when they're, that was really really good, really good. I've enjoyed James Cameron's films the last couple of years, but he's nowhere near as amazing as he was back in those films. I just hope one day he makes another Terminator film. He's writing one. Yeah. I mean, Terminator is one of those films too that's hard, and I think that's why, like Genesis, and I know you said you're a fan of Genesis, but after Terminator 2, that was like peak Cameron, peak Cameron. You can't. I mean, it's Mount Rushmore times 10. So everything after that, you're always going to be like, it's good, but it wasn't Terminator 2. So that all being said, I think that the thing is he's done. I mean, if he's writing one, fantastic. But I think he's done because he's right now focusing. This is why we waited so long for Avatar, and of course, he proved his point. Never bet against James Cameron. Dolph Lundgren's performance, yes, it is. It's really top notch. So, speaking of top notch, okay, it's always interesting to see films that don't perform well to start out, but they gain traction later on. And that's exactly what happened with Elemental. Elemental is one of those animated pictures that I think had a lot of problems isn't the right word. A lot of things going against it. First and foremost, it was coming out the same day as The Flash. Okay. And that really hurt it because The Flash was so anticipated and everybody was looking forward to that so much that every Elemental got left behind. And all of that being said, I think that when it comes right down to it, that it's one of those things where I think Elemental is going to be a good film, and it's hard to make up once you really don't have a grasp on things. So this comes to us. The reason I bring this up is this comes to us from Variety, and it says Elemental expands into third weekend and whips Indiana Jones. Pixar's animation film Elemental expands at the South Korean box office in its third weekend of release and easily bests the new release title Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Elemental earned $5.27 million between Friday and Sunday, according to the data from the box office tracking service operated by the Korean Film Council. That represents a 38% increase on its previous weekend and was the best for 3 weekends so far. It also increased its market share to 39%, also its strongest market position, despite having a handful of additional screens. After 19 days on release, Elemental has surpassed $16.9 million from almost 2.5 million spectators. The film's third week holdover compared favorably to the new release Indiana Jones, which had a $2.8 million weekend session over a full 5-day opening weekend period. Indiana Jones whipped up $3.98 million. The film's slightly disappointing numbers were matched elsewhere in the world. It turned $60 million in North America, which I spoke about earlier, and $70 million from international territories. It goes on to say that the Korean phenomenon, the Roundup No Way Out, slipped to third place, and Across the Spider-Verse earned $1.1 million in fourth place, and there were a couple of others. The Flash, okay, in its third week of release, made $121,000 for a cumulative total of just shy over $5 million. That tells you something. That tells you something. But to see the resurgence of this is awesome. I can't begin to say how cool this is because this is much needed for Pixar. It may not be doing well in the States. And I would suggest this. Pixar finished with, third this week here in the States. I would suggest it's even going to do better next week. Right? Because, it's going to pick up. This is what I mean about picking up momentum. And I think that this is needed for all of the pictures, especially an animated picture like Pixar. Pixar has Elemental. So definitely. If he directs another Terminator film, it will definitely reassure people's interest in the franchise because there's still a lot of roads left where you can take the series. Yeah, I agree. And, look, there's plenty of stories to be told with that. There's plenty of stories to be told with that. So, and I agree. But, yeah, Pixar needs a win. And they need it badly. And I think the fact that you're getting another boost with this, especially in a Korean market overseas, it's a major victory for them. So I'm glad to see this doing well. Anyways, guys, what do you think about Elemental actually making a lot of money in Korea? Do you think this is actually going to boost the domestic box office here? Do you think this could actually have a chance to get to second place next weekend if Indiana Jones doesn't do well? Or do you think Elemental's kind of resided to, taking the lower spots? Leave me your thoughts down in the comments, and I'll get back to everybody. Okay. So, there is one more story. And when I read this, I was a little, taken aback. I'm not going to lie. So that being said, I just want to anybody. So as I made mention earlier in the show, okay, we have a new Barbie film coming out, and I think that it may start to set a trend. And if it does, it will be interesting to see what happens. So, this comes. So the film that I'm referring to, and anybody that's not familiar with this, okay, is Barney. Barney. So they're actually right now in development. The studios are right now in development to make let's call it a Barney movie. They are right now today looking to make a Barney movie. And I don't know. I mean, we'll have to see what happens. I mean, so the actor who's going to be one of the people that signed on is Daniel Kaluuya. So Daniel Kaluuya, of course, is an Academy Award-winning actor. Okay? He won for Get Out. I mean, he's worked with Jordan Peele for the majority of his career. I mean, he's been in films like Black Panther. Okay? He's done Get Out. He's done Nope. He's done, a number of other films. And it's just interesting. So this comes from Variety again. And it says, Daniel Kaluuya's Barney movie is, quote, an A24 type film that's surrealistic and for adults, says Mattel exec. With Greta Gerwig and Margot Robbie's Barbie gearing up for the box office domination this month, the movie is eyeing a launching pad for Mattel Films. There's an interesting article I want to touch upon before we finish today. The studio has dozens of films in the pipeline based on its toys and IP, including a Barney movie with Daniel Kaluuya. The Get Out Oscar nominee and Us star first attached themselves to Mattel's Barney movie back in 2019, and a new profile of Mattel Films published by The New Yorker, which is the piece I want to cover, confirms the project remaining in development. Mattel Films executive Kevin McCoy told The New Yorker that the Barney film is, quote, surrealistic, end quote, in the vein of films directed by Charlie Kaufman and Spike Jonze. These directors are probably not the first two filmmakers to think of when the family film Barney comes up. We're leaning into the millennium angst of the property rather than fine-tuning this for kids, McKean said. It's really a play for adults. Not that it's R-rated, but it's focusing on some of the trials and tribulations of 30-somethings growing up with Barney. Just a level of disenchantment within the generation. McKean also described the Barney movie as, quote, A24, end quote, type of movie. It would be daring for us and really underscore that's why we're here to make art. While the project first got announced in November of 2019, Mattel's film Robbie Brenner said that working with Kaluuya would allow the studio to, quote, take a completely different approach to Barney that would surprise audiences and subvert expectations, end quote. Barney was a ubiquitous figure in many of our childhoods, and then he disappeared in the shadows, left misunderstood, Kaluuya added at the time. We're excited to explore this compelling modern-day hero and see if his message of I love you, you love me can stand the test of time. Updates on the project have been scarce since the year since. Kaluuya told Yahoo Entertainment earlier this year that it would take time to crack the perfect script. The script's got to be good. You know what I mean? It's in development, Kaluuya said. I ask for high standards on anything that I work on, and I'm producing this one, so it's still in development. So it talks about the New Yorker article after this. But this is just a fascinating development. And I think that when you have a guy like Daniel Kaluuya, by the way, Judas and the Prince, this looks really interesting. It's all going to depend, I think, on how Barbie does. This is all hinging on Barbie. I mean, they're not trying to make this universe and everything else, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens with this. I think I got to be honest. I don't know what to think about this. I mean, and look, and I've said the same thing about Barbie. I may walk out of Barbie and go, "Oh my God, that was amazing! I can't believe I thought." But this is really interesting. So, I mean, look, if he could pull it off, he could pull it off. And I'll tell you something right now: if they do pull it off, they're going to look like geniuses. They're going to look like geniuses. So, I don't know. I'm really interested in this. I'm intrigued. That is the key word of the day. I'm intrigued because I think that if it works, it's going to work for a lot of people. So, yeah. So let me get to the. Let me get to the article, and then I'm going to get to your guys' comments. I see you there. So this is the. So by the way, guys, I will leave the link in this article. I will leave the link in the story in the description. It's quite a long article. I went through the first half of it. I want to go back and finish it later, but it's actually quite interesting. Okay, it's quite interesting. So they have and I'm going to just briefly brush over this with broad strokes. So, like, they have J.J. Abrams right now doing a Hot Wheels. Now, mind you, one thing they say in this is they have over a dozen different things in development, as the article said. However, they're not all going to get developed. So they have right now J.J. Abrams with Hot Wheels. They have Vin Diesel doing a Rock'em Sock'em Robots one. They even have. Okay, so he talks about how Greta Gerwig actually wanted to do Barbie. She visited Mattel and everything else. And by the way, I may be forgetting some stuff in here, so you guys can go back and read this. But so they were, Margot Robbie took on the project. She was really interested, and what is exciting me a lot, the one I can't wait to see if this is true. So there's a couple, okay, and so 13 films are being announced, has been publicly announced, including a He-Man movie. That's the one I'm looking forward to the most. So that's the one that really. So what ended up happening, how it got developed. Let me just read you this because it's interesting. Kretz's theory, because he was an executive there, had become an IP factory wasn't revolutionary. Lego just created a hit animated films, okay? And Mattel executives were repeatedly noted, okay, that the company's main rival, Hasbro, had turned in a toy robot line, Transformers, which turned into a multi-billion-dollar franchise. So Hasbro actually they struck a 6-year deal with Hasbro, or Universal, and then got out. But listen to this, guys. This is interesting. Hasbro had struck a 6-year deal with Universal, which secured the rights films to a grab bag of other toys and games, including Monopoly and Candyland. Okay. And they actually had Russell Crowe attached at one point to play Uncle Pennybags. The same guy, the mustache in Monopoly. And Ridley Scott was going to direct it. But yeah, but what they ended up doing was, of course, making Battleship all those years later. Long story short, as I said, one of the other IPs they're looking for is they're actually going to do He-Man. So the way it was developed, and I'm trying to find it here. Anyways, the way it was developed, I'll just tell you, is that it was so So Mattel was looking for another type of toy to do. And what ended up happening was they actually um, what ended up happening was they were looking at what did boys want to do because Kenner was taking the market share. And so they did a lot of market research and they said power. And so what they did is they ended up making He-Man. And they ended up developing He-Man. Of course, they had He-Man, Skeletor, and Castle Grayskull and everything else. And all of these things you see here, okay? So you have a major Mike, okay, that is actually based on Lightyear to a certain extent, okay? You have Barney, which we were just talking about. You have He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, which they're actually making, they're developing as we speak, okay? Rock'em Sock'em Robots, which I was just talking about, Vin Diesel's doing. There's Skeletor for He-Man. And down here you have Barbie with the car. So they are leaning into a lot of IP that they have. And a lot of this is going to hinge on what happens with Barbie. Because if Barbie doesn't do well, I got to imagine a lot of this stuff is either never going to see the light of day or because they don't want to go through with it. So I haven't heard, so let's get to your comments here real quick. I've heard good word of mouth about Elemental, in my opinion. In my opinion, this could be another good dinosaur type of film. I don't know if you've seen that. So I have not seen it, but I've heard about Good Dinosaur. And that's one of those things where it could be very interesting to see if it holds up. I think Lightyear hurt Pixar's reputation quite much. I enjoyed the film, but it was kind of... So I saw Lightyear myself, and I think the thing about Lightyear was they marketed it wrong. I think they marketed it wrong. I think when they marketed that, first of all, you didn't have Tom Hanks, or you didn't have Tim Allen come back. That was a big downer. You had Chris Pratt doing the voice. That itself, because everybody knew who Buzz Lightyear was. That being said, the way they marketed it, I think, really didn't work. And I thought it was okay. I mean, I've only seen it once, but I do remember. I thought it was a relatively good movie for its time. And I think, too, also, the fact that you have, and go back to Bob Chapek. He's reconditioned people to watch things Turning Red and all these others through Disney Plus. And that hurt it dramatically. I remember seeing Barney as a kid, but I don't remember the premise at all. It was, I believe, Teletubbies. Yeah, it was. It was basically, exactly. It was like, he basically was like a, to a certain extent, you're right, Antonius. I mean, he was love, he was friendship, he was, everything like that. It was never something like that. I'd be curious to see if that would be interesting. Let me guess. Barney would be a transgender character, and the story would be about. I don't know. I don't know that. I don't know. I can't see him being transgender. I don't know. If anything, I'd see him being a generic character, like a basic white wall type of thing, where you could be a blank canvas, if you will, right? Be anybody you want to be. That's the way I could see it. But I think that the story, that the theme, you're right, would be about acceptance and society. I wouldn't hate it. Yeah, I'm intrigued. I gotta say, I'm intrigued. Did you hear that Mattel is working upon 45 new films? Okay, so basically, it's insane. If they're doing that, Barbie is Mattel. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So Mattel owns a lot of IP. And like I said, the reason why they're leaning into this is because of A, the popularity. B, they have a lot of stuff that, they're going to be doing a lot of nostalgic things, like Monopoly. If that will never come to fruition, God, I hope not. But I mean, it would be fascinating. That would be fascinating. But He-Man, so anybody who knows anything about the 80s, okay, there was a little movie. I'm going to see if I can't try and track down a photo real quick for you guys. Anybody who's from the 80s or even the 90s. So this goes back to it was done in 1987. So yeah, let me see if I can't just bring this up to you guys real quick. So essentially, what ended up happening was this was so popular. Okay. This was so popular that they made it. When I say they, it was Mattel and everybody else. They made an animated series out of this. And so there was a little movie made. Speaking of Dolph Lundgren, who's in Creed 2, there was a little movie made back in 1987. Okay. And here's the photograph of it. Sorry, guys. This was the photograph done back in 1987. Okay. This was Masters of the Universe. This is the only film iteration we have of Masters of the Universe. And this thing has been in development hell for the past 25 years. So, yes, that is Dolph Lundgren, okay? That was in Rocky 4 and Creed 2, and he's been in the Expendables. And that guy is the Frank Leringer. I'm mispronouncing his name. But he's done Good Night and Good Luck, and he was in a couple of other. He's a very good actor. And they wanted to make a feature film in this because it was so. They were trying to dominate and get it and do it so well that this was what it was. And the film was just a disaster. At the new MCU Mattel Cinematic Universe, that's good. That's really good, Dad. I don't know. Marvel would probably sue them for copyright infringement, though. I mean, but no, that's really good. I like that a lot. It's going to be interesting to see what Vin Diesel is going to do besides his IP movies. The last time he tried to do that was a box office disaster, talking about Bloodshot. Yeah, it always fascinates me when actors do not, when they do not do their IP. I mean, look at Marvel, for example. Okay, you take a look at Marvel actors and actresses, and I'm talking about the big names. Okay, whether it's Chris Evans, yes, he was successful in Knives Out and whatever else. He just did a romantic comedy with Elizabeth Olsen that didn't do so hot. You take a look at Elizabeth Olsen, okay? I'm talking about outside the MCU, okay? You take a look at somebody like, God rest his soul, Chadwick Boseman. Before he was in the MCU, I did a little movie called Draft Day. I loved that with Kevin Costner and Jennifer Garner. But he did 21 Bridges after he was done with Black Panther, which the Russos were executive producers. Take a look at Robert Downey Jr. What does he do? He goes out and does Doolittle. He doesn't need the money, but he does Doolittle. It's always interesting to see what they do outside of their IP. Everybody knows them for the IP, but it's like, can you actually produce outside of it? Which is interesting. There's a rumor, I don't know if you've heard it, but according to a scooper, Henry Cavill told a couple of people that enjoyed Josh Whedon's Superman a lot more. Thoughts on it? I mean, then I mean that's great. I mean, you know, it's one of those things where anybody, if you're a star, you can like anything. I have no, if you're a, honestly, if you're a star and you say I like a film, cool. That's your taste. And I think the other thing too is besides that he played the role had something to do with it, right? I mean, we'll never know if he had how much creative control he had or not because it was only one film, but still, I mean, I think there's something to be said about that too. I like that movie. Just don't understand why they changed the name to certain village. Do you mean Masters of the Universe, Dad? Is that the one you're talking about? Masters of the Universe was great from what I can remember, at least. Yeah, it was. Plus, canon, regardless of what anyone thinks, made a lot of fun of movies back in the day. His Punisher name was too. Yeah, I loved it. It's one of those cult classics. Okay, so you were talking about that. Yeah. No, absolutely. I love Masters of the Universe. I think it is a cult classic today. It's one of those films that's so bad, it's good. I mean, you got to remember too, okay? This was 1987. And like, this is only 10 years after Star Wars comes out. And you know what? I'm going to look into that right now. I think, don't quote me on this, but I think ILM did the effects in this. I think. So, that being said, it was okay. So this was the same guy actually. So they kind of changed. I understand why they changed it to a certain extent. Let me see if I can find who did the special effects. It doesn't matter, but so this came out in August. I mean, it's one of those things where, yeah. So Gary Godred did it. Okay, he did. Let's see if he has anything else here he's known for. Yeah, I mean that's essentially what it was. His big claim to fame was that. No, I mean, but to your point though, I can understand why they changed the things. So, you know what it is? I think the reason why they changed it, okay, because if you look at some of the villains, like Evelyn wasn't that bad, like name wise, but you take a look at some and I don't even know if they had Trapjaw in there, but Trapjaw was a villain. They had Beastman, so they could have said, well, it's too close to Beastmaster, because don't forget that was a big thing during that time. That's a possibility. So if you take the CGI out of it, the take it wasn't bad. It just didn't feel organically right with the previous two films. But Batman was funny, but not in a good way. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that, it's one of those films. Yeah. I mean, Justice League is actually a kind of guilty pleasure film that has some great moments, and like the entire sequence between Bruce and Diana on the rooftop scene. Yeah, I mean, it's it's one of those things where I think at the end of the day, he got to make his Zack Snyder talking about. He got to eventually make what he wanted to. It should have been $1 billion movie, and it wasn't. And there were a lot of problems and everything else. So, I mean, I think we're going to look back once this new Superman comes out too. I think, I mean, look, the most scrutinized movies for Warner Brothers are always going to be Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. Always. And I think that because that's their marquee names and they're superheroes. So I don't know. I mean, I watched the Snyder cut. It was good. It was okay. I mean, I didn't really have a feeling one way or another behind it. I just wanted to see it because I heard everybody was talking about it. So, but yeah, no, it's always interesting to see movies. If Mattel actually can do it and do it right, I'm in. I'm in. I mean, so as of right now, I don't know if they have um, a long time. They had yeah. So it says, oh, okay. So according to this, and according to the article too, they on IMDb they actually have the directors and they have the writers and they have a star, but nothing's been. David Goyer, of course, who did Man of Steel, is actually writing that too. So that'll be interesting. James Gunn said the score is in active progress as we speak. Yeah, I think. Look, it will be interesting to see what happens with how if and when they push back. A lot's going to depend on this writer's strike. I know I keep going back to it, and it's not a sexy thing, but it's going to go back to the writer's strike. The longer this strike goes on, the further and further and further things are going to get pushed back. So, but yeah, I would love to see a Masters of the Universe movie happen. I think that would be awesome. But we'll see. I mean, let's get the Barbie movie out and let's see what this makes because a lot of it is depending on Barbie. He also teased a fresher look at the costume, although it's purely speculations, but it could work. CW made it work with the same costume as well as the King. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they'd be able to use the same costume. I mean, I imagine so. It's the same IP, so. David Goyer was the director of Blade Trinity 2, a very divisive but fun film. Yeah, and that's another film everybody's looking forward to is Blade. So, but okay, guys. So here's the plan. Couple of things. Programming note number one, as I said at the top of the show, no show tomorrow. Tomorrow's the 4th of July, and I'm not going to do a show. So I'll probably get in line things of what I'm going to do for the coming weeks or so. Number two, perfect movies. I think what I've decided to do is I said I was going to do Spotlight. I think I'm going to do Skyfall, the 2012 Sam Mendes classic James Bond film. Made over $1 billion, but it is a perfect film. Roger Deakins was a cinematographer, masterful cinematographer on that. Loved the story. Silva was amazing. Yeah, so I'll sit down and watch that. I will record that within the next week or two, and that will be out. Number three, Mob Mondays and Rewatch Wednesdays. I'm still in the process of thinking what I want to do for that. Ideally, I want to try and get that out within the next week or two, just to get that out. So, and that will be going on the Patreon. And if you guys want to support me, and I know like Dad is a member, and there's a couple. I'm trying to get a list, like a little cover screen before every show, to show the members on here. But whether you're doing a membership with the channel or you want to go support me on Patreon, there's two different levels, $5 and $10. I made it very, very simple and cheap for you guys. $5 gets you Mob Mondays. That's going to be one Mob Monday or one Mob movie per month. We've got The Departed up there. Goodfellas is up there. I want to get another one up there. Rewatch Wednesdays is movies I've seen, but I haven't seen in a long time. So got Steve Jobs up there. Got Training Day. Got another one up there for you guys. You can go grab something at the store if you like. There's mugs and T-shirts and all that type of stuff. And yeah, I don't know what else. I think that's it. We don't need any other films. There'll be another Mummy 2017 with Barbie. Yeah, let's see how Barbie does first. We need original content, not rehashed nostalgia. And I agree with you. Like I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that New Yorker article in the link in the description box for you guys to read. I'd like to see what you guys think. If what might actually come out of that. You're right, but I don't mind the nostalgia stuff. As I said to Dave many times, it's good for the people who didn't grow up with that and get to build the memories now. Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, guys. So that's going to do it. Cool. So do the 3 things you need to do. Be safe, be careful, have a great rest of the day. And if you're in the United States, have a great holiday tomorrow. And I will catch you back here on Wednesday, and we'll be doing another show. Okay. I'm David Steele, and this has been Real Talks. Bye-bye, guys.